Good morning. Today is Monday, August 29th. Oh, that window's too bright. Give me one second. That's better. Thank you. Sorry. No, a lot of people here for Monday. So we did Monday because of scheduling. Better do Monday than not, you know. So usually we'll go back to Sunday next week. Let's set our intention and aspirations by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. We have to end at 11 sharp today, so we'll meditate. I don't have a ton to talk about, and then we'll go to questions earlier. So if you have any questions you've been hesitant about asking, or you wanted to ask about anything, that we've done or discussed here, today's a good day to do it, because we're going to leave a little more time for that. Anyone here who's new, who hasn't done this class, we're not doing a full review. I think we did one last week. So you can go to our YouTube channel, Meditation with Michael. Oh, I always forget that address, Nick, if you can put that up. There's a YouTube channel. I think it's Meditation with Michael Imperioli, or Michael Imperioli Meditation, something like that. And the first two classes of this year, of 2022, January, have really detailed reviews. I mean, you don't have to leave. You can sit through it and just try your best to follow along with us. But we don't do reviews every week because most of you are repeat offenders. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit discombobulated today. Okay, let's start. Let's meditate. Let's start with the 9 purifying breaths. One thing I didn't add last week, and when you make the Vajra fist, right? So you put your thumb against the base of the ring finger. And we do that, when we're working with the nostrils. We keep that on the third set of breaths. Even though your hand is on your knees, you keep that Vajra fist. It's important. Okay? Let's start with the 9 purifying breaths. Right hand to the left nostril. Imagine the 3 channels, right? So the channels, there's the white and the red. The middle is blue in everybody, right? In men, the white is on the right, the red is on the left. Women, it's reversed. And you can imagine the channels going from here, up behind your head, down the spine, and they all meet, the 3 of them, below the navel. So, visualize that. Right hand to the left nostril, breathing into that right channel, which is for me, it's the white one. Hold right below the navel where the 3 channels join, and then breathe out of the same channel. Even though you're switching nostrils, you're only working on that one channel first. Breathe in patience if you're working with the white one. Breathe in generosity if you're working with the red one today. Let's switch. Breathe out anger if it's the white channel. If it's the red, breathe out attachment. Sticky attachment. Sticky desire. And by that I mean attachment that makes you fixated. I'm not talking about love, for your children or your partner and stuff. that kind of obsessive, that can engender or stimulate greed, competitiveness, aggression, all those things. Keep the Vajra fist, go to the lap. We're going to work into the central channel, which is we're breathing in wisdom and the view of Buddhism, which is interdependence, impermanence, and emptiness of inherent existence. And we're breathing out delusion and ignorance. The last breath, imagine ejecting your consciousness out the top crown chakra, merging your consciousness with space. Forceful breath. And go right into meditation. Relax. Focus on the breath first. So I'm going to speak to you today as if you've been doing this for quite a while. Okay? Maybe you haven't been, but that's okay. You can hear what I'm going to say anyway. So first, just check into what your mind is doing. Mind looking at mind. So to check in with what mind is doing, we use mind, right? And that action in itself takes a lot of courage and bravery and honesty. It's a very noble act. And chances are the mind is thinking thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, maybe thoughts even of the present. And we have techniques in which we work with those thoughts, liberating those thoughts. Being honest with ourselves as to what those thoughts are. For instance, and keep with your practice while I talk. Don't just stop what you're doing to listen to me. Keep meditating. Yesterday, I was excited about something and related that to someone else. And that person didn't react with the same amount of excitement that I had, first of all, or that I had wanted, or expected, or felt I deserved. And immediately the first thought was, this person is wrong, this person is not respecting me, this person is not giving me what I deserve. And then I recognized that I was thinking that. and then said, well, that's just my point of view. Maybe that person doesn't really understand exactly what I'm excited about, doesn't have the same connection to that. Maybe that person is tired. Maybe that person is going through their own thing. And maybe they do understand it, but they're just not expressing it in a way that's matching my enthusiasm. And then I was able to just leave it as it was and kind of accept what was, it wasn't that this person was being rude or ignoring me, but I was able to just be okay with it. Because I realized that I was projecting my expectations onto something. So I was creating this false theater or stage in which I was writing a script that I was hoping this person was going to play the part that I had expected them to play and say the words that I expected them to play. And then when I let that go, I was very liberated and it was okay, and I felt connected to that person even more so than I did before. And because I was able to give that a little bit of space, we connected even deeper. And I felt that person's support even more, despite my expectations initially not being met. I hope that makes sense. But, this experience would not have happened if I didn't have the benefit of being able to just take a moment and try to see what's really going on when I said, look at what your mind is doing. And being very clear and honest about what you're doing, what your motivation is, what your goal is, what you're trying to do. I have very competitive and ambitious tendencies, habitual tendencies that can easily become aggressive, not in a violent way, I mean in a very grasping way. And that habitual pattern set up that whole scenario of expectation. Okay, back to the breath. Enough blabbing. Let's look at our mind. The thought can be liberated using the visualization of a cloud dissolving back into the sky in which it arose. Clear, limitless, unstained, infinite blue clarity, which is the nature of mind. So what does this practice mean that we're looking at the truth of what's going on, right? We're trying to really get to the essence of what's arising in the mind and why is it arising with the mind and what it actually is and what it's not. So I guess in some way it's a pursuit of the truth. In a very mundane level, as Buddhism really is about pursuit of the truth on a very ultimate level. But we have to start somewhere, don't we? And we always got to start with ourselves. Okay, I'm going to read something. This is a great quote. Tibetan Buddhist saint Milarepa. Some of you have heard about Milarepa before. Milarepa was a Tibetan who lived, I think, probably 1,000 years ago, maybe 1,100 years ago, maybe less, maybe 800 years ago. I got my dates mixed up. I think it's more like 800 years ago. So anyway, he was a young man, and his father died. And his father had some money, but the money his father had was kind of stolen by his father's brother or sister and their family. And basically, they cheated Milarepa and his mother out of this fortune and turned them basically into slaves, servants. And Milarepa's mother convinced Milarepa to learn some magic to, get revenge and reclaim his birthright. And he did. He learned some sorcery from somebody and caused a fire that killed his uncle and aunt. And he was horrified at the results of his actions and just felt he had really lost himself to negative karma, negative actions, and evil. And went on a very long and arduous journey to get the teachings of the Buddha, really, and found a great teacher named Marpa, who also was a translator, translating from Sanskrit, I guess, into Tibetan. Marpa was a student of Naropa, who was an Indian, uh, very learned scholar, and he was the student of Tilopa, who was who was a yogi, a hidden yogi, really, um, who was really the beginning of the Kagyu lineage that's of Tibetan Buddhism, which Garchen Rinpoche is a part of. Those of you who have taken refuge with Garchen Rinpoche are now connected to that exact lineage. Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa. And Marpa put Milarepa through a lot of a very arduous tasks. He had to build a tower and tear it down and reconstruct it many, many times. And he was very harsh with Milarepa, but they were methods to really break through this incredible negative karma that he had created. But eventually, Milarepa became one of the great Tibetan saints and yogis, purifying all this negative karma and becoming enlightened. Anyway, so this quote I read today, and he says, I study my mind, so all appearance becomes my text. I study my mind, so all appearance becomes my text. So you're studying your mind. So everything that appears in your mind, everything that appears in front of you, you're filtering it, you're experiencing it through the mind. So that basically what he's saying is all the reality that he's engaging in becomes teachings for him. So every thought, every interaction, every engagement is an opportunity for study and for studying the mind. I thought it was very beautiful. And there's something else I read today that I liked. Mind's nature is indivisible emptiness and clarity. Inexpressible, indestructible like space. When it is seen, there is no separate one who sees. There is but a single all-encompassing sphere. Even looker and looking are one and the same. This view of seeing all at once is unsurpassed, a centerless, limitless experience beyond compare. In this fruition, when what must be done has been done, there's no seeing at all, and any wish to see, Any deep longing to discover the view is naturally destroyed from its very depths. To arrive at such contentment and evenness is to be touched by brave Manjushri's beneficent light. That's from a book called Beyond the Ordinary Mind. Selected works by Patrul Rinpoche, Jamyal Mipam, Dodrupchen, Jigme Tempe Nima. Beyond the Ordinary Mind. Meaning when you really discover and realize the nature of mind, that is enlightenment. You know, when that becomes the state that you're in, you know, always, that's full enlightenment, right? When that's complete, it is who you are. But in the nature of mind, there's no separation anymore. There's nothing separating you from anything else, from the one, non-duality, the wholeness, from the view of Buddhism, which is in, you know, it's being completely plugged in, if you will, to the view, to the whole, to the ultimate truth. There's nothing else really to do. That's very deep and profound, isn't it? It's connected to what we were saying about Milarepa. By the way, if you do have questions, this is a good time to start writing them in. I study the mind. So we study the mind. You know, when we're meditating, we're trying to look at what the mind is doing and letting go of these thoughts. And, you know, you can also start taking things a step further, not just in meditation, but in life, like really examining why you feel angry towards this person, what you're trying to get through this person. You may feel very justified about a lot of things that trigger emotion. But sometimes that's not enough, the justification. There's other things going on that it's good to get to the bottom of, because our habitual tendencies are so strong, so ingrained in us over so much time, so many lifetimes, you know, that it takes great effort to transcend them. It really does. And a lot of patience. And bringing this level of awareness that we're cultivating here, you know, mindfulness, to life, to interactions with others, is really, 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 really very important. Let's see if there's any questions. When you spoke about letting go of attachment, but not necessarily of love with children and partners, how can we practice detachment with love in situations with people we care about while still speaking our truth? Yeah, listen, you're going to have attachment, of course, to your children. And to, you know, that's a natural thing. You also have responsibilities to your children, to your loved ones, to your parents. It's when those things become unhealthy, where you know, it gets to the point where you are either you feeling you have to control, and you're controlling out of energy that's your own negative habitual tendencies that you're kind of passing on or working with, if it's with children or interacting with. You know, it's finding that balance and that sanity. You know, you can't just say, well, I'm going to detach from my children. So what does that mean? You're not going to love them. You're not going to care for them anymore. You know, there's a basic level of sanity that we have to adhere to. when you're saying while still speaking our truth, well, you also have to figure out when's a good time to be honest. I mean, with children, it's a very different thing because there's certain ages where you're not prepared to hear certain things and honesty and all the time. But in relationships, especially long-term relationships, you can fall into certain habitual patterns, habitual roles, and things that may or may not be suiting you anymore, may be limiting you or frustrating you or causing you pain. That's an area, and you don't want the relationship to end. So there may be a point where you have to speak up about this need is not being met, or I want things to go in this direction. Can we work towards this? It's about being honest and being open. Um, Attachment can be to a lot of different things. The more extreme versions of it is addiction, right? And you can be addicted to a lot of different things. It could be alcohol, drugs, it could be food, it could be sex, it could be pornography, it could be work, earning money. It's when things become kind of an unhealthy obsession. That's more what we're talking about with attachment. We're not talking about becoming somebody who, has no more, not loving your family or not engaging with your family anymore or things like that. That's not what we're talking about. But you have to find a balance when to speak the truth, in what situations. You have to use, your wisdom, and really try to. That's why the more honest you are with yourself, if you really try to look at your motivations of why you're asking for things and why you want things, and really being brutally honest, which is very hard. Why do I want this from my partner? Is it because I'm jealous? Is it because I don't trust them? Is it because I think it's really necessary to keep the relationship moving forward and keep it, to evolve it in a positive way? Um, if that's not clear, Nadia, you can ask another question in this. I'm new here. Thank you for the practice. My question is, you're an Italian American, I suppose, raised Catholic. Are there any similarities between Catholicism and Buddhism? Are they compatible? You can't be a Catholic and a Buddhist at the same time. That doesn't work. You either are a Catholic or a Buddhist. That's at least what I've been told. Some people decide to call themselves Buddhists, but you can't really decide to call yourself a Buddhist. A Buddhist is someone who's actually taken refuge in the Buddha, basically saying, I will take refuge in the three jewels. While I am in samsara, I will take refuge from the suffering of samsara in the Buddha, the Dharma, which is the teachings, and the Sangha, which is the community of Buddhists. And that's an official vow that you take with a teacher. That's what makes you a Buddhist, not you just deciding you're a Buddhist or feel like you're kind of a Buddhist. You either are or you're not. There's a very good book called What Makes You Not a Buddhist by Zongsar Khyentse Rinpoche that goes into all this in amazing detail and clarity. But you don't have to be a Buddhist to meditate, and you don't have to be a Buddhist to find the teachings helpful or interesting. You can be a Catholic and read Buddhist texts and study Buddhism and meditate and use whatever wisdom or insight you gain from those things in your practice of Catholicism. I think the similarities, I think all true spiritual paths essentially are about, really finding the truth, which is that oneness, that non-duality. A really good teacher named Tsokne Rinpoche was asked, do Buddhists believe in God? Buddha was not a god. He's not worshipped as a god. There's no creator story in Buddha, like a creator god, a creator being that made everything. That's not, doesn't exist in Buddhism. But he said, Buddhists don't believe in the concept of God, but they do understand the nature of God, meaning, God was not, in Catholicism, God is not a person. right? It's a almost inexplicable energy being, whatever it is. And I think when we talk about the view of Buddhism, which is everything's impermanent, everything is interconnected, everything arises depending on other things, we are not just these bodies, we are, you know, energy and vibrations and come from the stars and in unity of all things, we are part of the unity of all things. I think that's very similar, you know. The other similarity is that uh, there is a certain ethical discipline to Buddhism that's also similar to most spiritual traditions. You can't really walk some kind of spiritual paths and still be an extremely selfish criminal, you know, who's lying, robbing, cheating, killing, being dishonest, and those things. So there are similarities, we never ever encourage. Actually, the Dalai Lama said, it's probably better if you're raised in a certain tradition to stay in that tradition if it's inspiring to you. But if Buddhism is something that really calls to you and you feel that that's the path you want to go down, then you should. But if you are happy and inspired by Catholicism, then you should stay with it, and if there's anything you can bring or gain from a study of Buddhism or meditation and bring that deep in your own spiritual practice of Catholicism, that's all a good thing. But we're not here to convert people and to make people Buddhists or anything like that, that's an individual choice, right? As someone who's new to meditation, does it help to envision your mind as a place, such as the sky, or in my case, I envision the ocean? We use the visualization technique of a sky to represent the mind. Often in Buddhist teachings, they call the sky-like nature of mind, because the nature of mind, how do you describe the nature of mind? Something that's so ineffable, you know, it's you can't really find words to describe what the nature of mind is. It's not really this tangible, logical thing that lends itself so easily to words. So we use representations, you know, limitless, clear blue, unstained mind, because the nature of the mind, despite all, you can have the worst thoughts and defiled thoughts and thoughts of negativity and greed and anger and attachment and all those things, and they come and go, and they don't touch the nature of mind. They don't stain the mind. The mind is limitless, unstained, and clear from the beginning. Always was and always will be. No matter what arises in it, eventually it will dissipate and leave that clarity. We find that helpful. Thanks for 2 great years. We've come so far, one class at a time. Yeah, we have. I'm very happy about that. Any advice for how to let go of deep pain after a cruel breakup? Breaking up is painful. Um, and the fact that you're feeling pain doesn't mean your practice has failed you or anything. You know what I mean? When somebody close to you dies, you're gonna feel pain. You're gonna suffer. You're gonna mourn. You're gonna have a lot of grief. When a relationship that means something to you ends, you're gonna suffer. You're gonna feel pain. When you say a cruel breakup, I'm assuming the person you were in a relationship was cruel, the way they broke up. You can try to have compassion for that person, because if they committed an act of cruelty, they're going to have to suffer negative consequences from that karma. Maybe not in this lifetime, maybe in the next, but karma, the results of karma are inevitable. Karma is unfailing. So there was something obviously about that person that you loved or you respected or cared for, and you can try to just. Sometimes it's good when we meditate and someone there's someone who's really made you mad or done something. Could be someone you don't even know, a politician, or you know what I mean, or somebody does something, and you have anger towards that person, hatred towards that person. Um, Sometimes it's good to envision them above your head as you meditate, like in a place of honor in a way. Almost as you're making the aspiration for their karma to be clear, so they can move past whatever it is that they're doing that's causing suffering or things like that. That's not letting them off the hook. We talk about this all the time. Being a Buddhist does not mean being a doormat. It's not about allowing bad behavior. It's not about justifying bad behavior. It's not about not standing up to bad behavior. This you're doing for yourself, really, because that anger that you're going to have towards that person, that resentment and stuff like that, really is not going to bother them if you've broken up already. It's just going to, it's poisoning you. So we're looking for ways to liberate those feelings. You told a story about how a person reacted to what you were excited about. Similarly, I was speaking with someone about something I was unsure of, and rather than offer support, they said, I have a feeling no matter what you choose, you won't be happy. It felt like a negative response since they knew I was indecisive over it. Is there another perspective I can see this from? Yeah, the other perspective is for you to see that, your whatever expectations you had from this person, why you had them, why you need them, why you would need that response, and understand that for whatever reason they can't give you that. Maybe they're jealous of you. Maybe they have a resentment towards you. Maybe they're saying something very honest that you need to hear. It's almost like you have to sort through the emotion to get at the truth. Is this a common theme in your relationship? Is there always this kind of antagonism or push and pull, Basically what we're doing is really getting kind of brutally honest with ourselves and what our responses are to situations, what our expectations are in situations. Like I said, we can justify a lot of things. We can justify the expectations we have from people, but that can get us into trouble. It felt like a negative response, especially since they knew I was indecisive. But, maybe that's their honest response, or maybe that negative response is what you need to hear. Maybe not. Maybe it's just a negative response, like I said, because they have some kind of resentment, or it's the habitual energy of the relationship or something. So, maybe it's a relationship that you need to speak up about and be honest about, that this hurt you, that that you feel like this is a repetitive thing that you need to get beyond so the relationship can evolve and stay healthy. Or maybe it's an impasse and you need to set up boundaries within the relationship, boundaries that aren't there, that are necessary for it to continue, or boundaries that need to be made so it won't continue, the relationship or the dynamic. Is there a type of attachment towards feeling certain way? I mean, when you see your mind and you notice you become attached to being sad or attached to being anxious. Yeah, absolutely. You can become attached to expecting things to not turn out well. You can become attached to a certain vibration of anxiety over a lot of things. Over the outcome of a certain situation, or a work situation, or a relationship, and things like that. I don't think it's a type of attachment. I think it's just attachment, period. Yeah, so yes, without a doubt. I attended a 7-day silent retreat last week. I had no trouble with the silence. My trouble was when the silence ended on the last evening. I resisted speaking again and had no interest in chit-chatting, despite having spent the past week developing loving kindness towards people. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. It's hard to engage in chit-chat after being silent for 7 days. Um, I don't think there's anything wrong with you. You know, people went into chit-chat because people are much more comfortable with chit-chat than they are in silence. You know, silence takes a certain confidence and a certain contentment. But you don't need, you're not uncomfortable in silence. You don't need to just engage in some meaningless chit chat because there's somebody across from you and you feel you need to engage because you don't want them to think they're ignoring you, or you don't want to feel like they're ignoring you or you're ignoring them. Um, but I mean, I've done silent retreats and I just love it. Um, I find it a really great component to a retreat, you know, because it really causes, you know, it really helps you just focus on what you're doing and while you're there, you know. Often when I travel, I spend a lot of time alone. And if I'm on location for a job, and sometimes you'll go a number of days and you won't work, and other people are working or something, and I can just go days without speaking to anybody. I have no problem with that. Um, some people do because they feel their energy kind of needs to kind of be spent that way. They're, you know, there's a verbal energy as well as a physical and a mental, you know. We talk about the actions of body, speech, and mind in Buddhism, right? That speech energy often people feel a need to engage in it, like fill in those silences. So there's nothing wrong with you. Um, you don't. You also there's nothing wrong with them either. They just feel like talking, so you don't have to turn it into like a resentment. You know. You also don't have to engage. You can get out of there quick and just go. You know, be alone or whatever. But you know, you have to understand where they're coming from too. But there's nothing wrong with you. Is your meditation method strictly from Buddhism? Yes. Um, yeah. Yeah. Meditation for me is part of my Buddhist practice. It's not something that's separate from it. Do you believe you can meditate and discipline yourself out of attachments and addictions, or do behaviors and conditions need additional treatments? Um, addiction is, I think addiction is something that A, can be very difficult to overcome, and B, life threatening, health threatening. So extreme measures often need to be taken because there's also, you know, often a very physical, psychological component to addiction as well as a spiritual. So I think addiction really warrants professional help, or at least some kind of therapeutic community help, like a 12-step or rehab if needed. Um, I think um, I think meditation could help and spiritual practice can help, but addiction is can be, you know, depending, you know, there's a wide spectrum of addiction and the intensity of addiction and the danger of addiction and where you're at in addiction. So you can't just, there's not a one size fits all thing here that I can say. Um, but even AA, you know, there's a spiritual component to that. You know, so something like AA that strictly addresses alcoholism, for instance, 12-step program. Alcoholics Anonymous is a 12-step program. The purpose of people to be released from the addiction to alcohol. There's a spiritual component that's very, very necessary um, to recovering in that program. I related to your story earlier about having expectations around how people react to your feelings of excitement, happiness, sadness, etc. In your story, you said you're able to stop yourself and realize the expectation you put on that person. My question to you is, what are some of the steps you took to get to that realization? Um, exactly what we're doing here, practicing teachings of Buddhism, practice of meditation, mindfulness, and all those things. My breakup with another misogynist still hurts. Yeah, breaking up hurts. Absolutely. Always finding another misogynist has made me very solitary and alone. How do I break with that bad karma begun by a cruel, punishing stepfather? I'm so old, therapy hasn't changed this compulsion toward finding punishing partners. Well, I mean, the good thing is that you're realizing that you're choosing this out of a habitual pattern. Um, I'm old, so therapy hasn't changed. Maybe you haven't found the right therapist. You know, not all. There's no one size. Like I said, there's no one size fits all. Maybe you haven't found the therapist that really can, you know, get through in the way that you need it. I would, I mean, obviously you're interested in Buddhism because you're here. There's a lot of therapists that you know use psychology or psychiatry with a Buddhist perspective. Maybe look into some of those. Google Buddhist psychologists or Buddhist psychiatrists or something like that. How do we let go, have a better view of friends we thought we had said who they would be there but never did? The fake persona that acted like they cared and they ignored you. I found a lot of people like this. The more that happens, the more I think it's my fault. Well, if you keep finding the same, it's the same thing we just said. We often find similar relationships. We find ourselves in similar relationships time and time again with different people, similar dynamics, because our habitual tendencies and patterns are so strong um, that they seek out repetitive things. Um, how to change these things? Therapy is very good, because therapy, begins that process of starting to kind of sort through what's going on. Why? Getting to the root of why these things, rather than just kind of reacting to these situations time and time again, getting involved and getting engaged again and again and again. Um, as well as a contemplative practice like meditation, and that also can help as well. Um, letting it go comes from um, it's hard to do that, but it's that's where they're at. If you can't kind of create a boundaries or be honest and talk about how we can move forward and evolve this relationship into something more positive, if that can't happen, then maybe it's better to let it go, or set a certain boundary that's going to limit the relationship in ways that's going to make it, more beneficial for you. And if you can't do that, then maybe you have to let it go. But that takes a lot of clarity and wisdom, and we have to work towards those things, either in therapy, contemplative practice, meditation, being really honest with ourselves and things like that. It's not There's no quick fix. Often people say, how do I do this? It's not like you're going to sit and meditate once and then all of a sudden you're going to change your life. It's making a decision to move towards more healthy behaviors, taking responsibility rather than just blaming everything on your partner, blaming this person. This person's bad and that's why I'm suffering. Blaming the parents because parents fucked you up when you were a kid. It's taking responsibility for where you're at, and then you're setting the rules. You're going to set boundaries. You're going to make decisions. You're going to make choices. My mother only engages in conversation that's negative and gossip. I get very aggravated and told her that I haven't been placed on this earth to judge anyone, that I don't want to gossip about anyone else. She's 80, so she's never going to stop, so I avoid her. How can I get control over the aggravation, the apprehension of seeing her? Well, avoiding her, maybe that's good. You have said that avoiding her is a boundary, because before you avoided her, you just engaged in that. So that's the first step. The other step is to see how, someone whose mind is fixated on judgment and gossip and negativity suffers because of that. You know what I mean? If that's your mindset, how happy, you know, how inspiring can that kind of life be? So you can you can try to find compassion for, the suffering that she goes through. You know what I mean? But it's the aggravation, I know, where you need to do the work, I guess. So if you just realize that's who she is and you create boundaries and you choose not to engage in that gossip, and if you can set those boundaries and say those things like you said, you've told her, I haven't been placed on this earth to judge anyone, and I don't want to gossip. You could say those things without anger, and say those things, out of a sense of honesty and dignity, and stick to your boundaries. I mean, familial stuff is hard, man. Parents, kids, that stuff is really, that's where, I mean, some of the trickiest dynamics in our lives are wrapped up there. So maybe you have to avoid her even more. I'm not saying avoid her to the point where you're neglecting her, but to the point when it's dangerous to her or unhealthy or things like that. You maybe have to care for her to some degree, but I mean, you can look at her as somebody who's sick. I don't mean sick mentally ill. I mean, sometimes they call samsaras like a hospital, and the Dharma is a medicine. We're all suffering in samsara. We're all kind of sick. And like I said, I'm not talking about mental illness. I'm just saying sick. We're not right, you know. And your mother doesn't have any way out of that right now. She's trapped there. Does meditation help you stay motivated? Because I try to meditate every day, I still feel unmotivated about life. That's a really hard question. Um, I mean, the point of meditation is not to be motivated. The point of meditation, from a Buddhist perspective, is to, work with our mind so we can kind of see the truth. Um, if you feel unmotivated about life, I'd really encourage you to look at why and what you can do to change that. Um, I mean, this is a very, very abstract question. I have no idea what the components of your life, relationships and work and living situations and all those things, what you're able to change, what you have to live with, and all those things. So I don't know. Meditation certainly can't hurt. Okay, we're going to close here. We're going to dedicate the merit from today's class for the benefit of all beings by saying our closing prayer. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of false and delusion. And when we say this, by this merit, may all beings, we're including your mother and the misogynist boyfriend, and the one who broke up with you in a cruel way, and those people who were gossiping and chit chatting, all those people, we're saying, by the merit we generated from this class today, by that whatever merit we did, dedicate it to the aspiration that all beings, including all those I just mentioned, attain a state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. And may they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you for being here. We'll probably meet next Sunday. Thank you, Nick Solidio, our producer, for his generosity and kindness. See you next week.